It is time for a long overdue update on the development of Low, my dungeon crawl board game. April was a very productive month. All right, let's start with the hero card redesign. I had to rethink the hero card because one of the main objectives of this refactor is to take all these item counters and convert them into mini cards. And there are several reasons why I'm doing that. Originally, all the rules for every item were in the rule book, but if you're playing a multiplayer game, you're passing around the rule book all the time, and it's kind of a headache. And then for release candidate 1, I went with this reference card system, but then I ended up with like 24 reference cards, and it was a little better than looking things up in the rule book. But then there are situations where, let's say one player has a couple ingredients and another player has a couple other ingredients, and there's only one ingredient reference card, so you're still passing around reference cards to figure out what's what. And there's just a huge stack of reference cards. It's just not a very modern design, and that's why a lot of modern board games use cards instead of counters. I was never intentionally trying to design a retro board game. It's just that most of the games I had played when I started designing this game were retro games, so I was just designing what I knew. But since I started building this game, I've been playing a lot more modern dungeon crawl board games, and I'm starting to see the beauty of some of the newer, more modern design approaches. So the nice thing about using mini cards for all the items is that all the rules for the item can be right on the card. It's more modular, it's more scalable. These slots were specifically designed to hold these counters, and yes, this was really cool. And there are some upsides to this, but I think in the long run, the card-based system is just gonna have more longevity, and it's gonna be easier to get to the table, easier to learn, and easier to manage in real time as you're playing the game. So I no longer need this big card. This, by the way, kept getting bigger and bigger with each release. It really kind of got to be a bit much. And what I've tried to do is reduce both of these, so this becomes this. And this new hero card basically has a built-in stat tracker. And then I thought, well, if my goal is to get rid of counters, as many counters as possible, how could I get rid of these stat track counters? Because there was 3 for each hero, and there's 4 heroes, so I would need 12 stat track counters. How can I get rid of 12 of these counters? One idea I had was to switch to dice and do all the stat tracking with dice. If this die were here, then his health would be 6. If it's here, it's 12. So this would be a health of 10. This would be a health of 4. But the only downside to this is I'm actually not a huge fan of tracking values with dice. I don't like the feel of rotating dice around to try to find the right pip count. I like the way it looks, and I like how clean this design is, but I'm not super crazy about actually flipping dice around. So then I was like, well, what if I sort of combined these two approaches, and I stuck with counters. This value range could still go up to 12 like the original stat tracker instead of 9. So in this version, each stat tracker counter has like a front and a back side. One side has a little plus and one side doesn't. So if your stat starts with a plus, it means you go down here, and as you lose health, when you get down below 1, you're not out. You flip the plus over to the blank side, and then you keep going. So if he starts with 6 plus health, he's actually starting with 12. So it's just a way to have like 12 values on the simple 6-slotted stat tracker. So that's kind of where I'm at with the hero card design, trying to get this down to this. Now for the item card design, I've iterated a lot on the look and feel of the item cards, and I think I'm getting pretty close to what a final item card might look like. If you're looking at the old counter design, it was kind of cool, but you would have to look up what the greatsword did in the rule book or the reference cards. Now you can just reference the item card all the time, and it has all the necessary information. There's going to be a few simple icons to learn. I think a solid arrow is just going to be an action, and then the hollow arrows are going to indicate optional rules that you can attach to actions. So this charge is actually a tactic that you can attach to your attack, and it basically boosts your attack by 1, but on a miss, your opponent automatically hits. So you can decide if you want to incorporate the optional rules into your attack. And then there'll be another symbol for worn items, items that automatically execute their function, you know, if they're worn. And then the Warhammer has always been kind of a tricky item. You can use it single-handed or double-handed. And so I broke down the functionality of, you know, single-handed and double-handed provide you with these actions, and then double-handed provides these extra rules, these extra bonuses. And maybe I'll incorporate some sort of icon to indicate like, hey, these are bonuses. And then here, for instance, the meat item, you know, there are 2 different actions that you can execute with this particular item. You can either eat it and gain vitals, or you can use it as bait to try to lure creatures. The upgrades are now going to be cards 2. I still need to do the art for these upgrades, but instead of the cost in gold, there'll be an XP cost in order to upgrade. So that's a basic summary of what I'm doing with hero cards, what I'm doing with the item cards. I have managed to get these 150 counters, which is 10 slugs, down to 1 single slug of half-inch counters. So a single slug of half-inch counters is 28 counters. If I decide that the half-inch counters are just too small, then I can go back to 3/4 inch like these, but I will need 2 slugs instead of 1. What I've got here are these little number counters, 1, 2, and 3, so you can track all kinds of things like how much meat you have, or the timer on a bomb, anything that needs to be counted, certain spells that have duration, you can use these little counters. And then these are basically just little paired letter combos. But if you don't get the standee add-on, then you can just use these sort of ancient occult-like symbols to mark that there is a baddie here, and then it's linked to cultists here. You can use the counting chits to indicate exactly how many cultists there are. Or you can use unused letter combos. Like, let's say we're not going to use the Fs because there just aren't that many monsters on the board, and you've got 3 cultists. You can just stack the Fs, 2 Fs under the B here, and then you've got your stack of 3 cultists. And then as members are defeated, you just remove from the bottom of the stack, and you keep the relevant ID on top. So there's like several different ways you could do it, and I'm still trying to figure out. Now, if literally nobody likes that approach, then, you know, I may have to just include the standees in the core game. That will increase the cost to the core game, and the standees are going to be laser cut, so they're going to have the soot problem. They're going to have to be scrubbed and assembled before you can play the game, but maybe ultimately that's what I'll have to do. The whole point with all this is I'm really going through all the options, prototyping all the options. Now, the design of these standees is still a work in progress. Now, Game Crafter offers 3 standee sizes. They offer these large standees, medium standees, and small standees. And that was just kind of a coincidence. These are the 3 sizes they offer, but it worked pretty well with my monster sizes and my monster types. And the small standees are kind of perfect for the human-sized monsters. So I think the standees could end up being a fun way to play the game. In some ways, I like this more than the old monster counter system from Release Candidate 1. All right, let's talk monster cards for a minute. So the monster cards were getting bigger and more complicated with every release, but everything I did to make things simpler just kind of made everything more and more complicated. I mean, originally over 2 years ago, the monster cards were poker sized. And so I've been kind of trying to get back to that, or just see if it's even an option. And I've come up with a couple different monster card designs. One would require some art on the front as well as the back. And then the other monster card design kind of has more of a banner across the back, and there would just be some portraits of the monster. But what I'm kind of going for, I think, with this design is all the combat logic on one side of the card and all the movement logic and monster phase turn action logic on the other side of the card, trying to figure out how to minimize the amount of card flipping that has to occur. Now, in my last video, I think I was a little too vague, and some people were led to believe that this game is just going to be a card game. And I just want to re-emphasize that the game is still a tabletop board game, and there are still going to be map tiles, and heroes are still going to be moving around, exploring new parts of the dungeon. The only thing that's switching to card-based is just the item management, resource management, and there will be quest cards. So instead of the complicated setup instructions for each scenario, there is going to be a small deck of quest cards, and all you'll have to do is shuffle that deck of quest cards and place them next to the map, and you'll just be drawing from that deck of quest cards as you explore new map tiles. So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, this is a freaking mess right now, but there is structure to this chaos, and I'm getting very close. I really just need to finish up a complete set of assets with or without finished art so that I can start playtesting scenario 1. If the new game design works well with scenario 1, then I know it'll work with the other 2 scenarios. There was a long period of time where I just couldn't work on this, but I also wasn't playing games. I was just really busy doing other things with my life that really needed to be attended to. And I was spending a lot of time outdoors in nature, and I was doing a lot of family stuff. Now I'm excited about game development again, and I'm excited about games again. I really just wanted to try a big box dungeon crawl board game with a pretty modern look and feel, with pretty modern mechanisms that I could play solo, because I don't really have a local gaming group at the moment, and I kind of just wanted to invest in a system that I could just kind of get lost in at night when my wife is out of town on business, and I just want to get away from the TV and away from the computer. I've always been kind of ambivalent about app-driven games. This is an app-driven game, and you cannot play this game without the app. And I would prefer to be able to play my board games without an app, but I'm willing to give anything a try, and I've been having a pretty fun time with this game. I mean, this is, in my opinion, a quintessential dungeon crawl board game. You're slowly exploring locations, you're placing map tiles as you explore. There are objectives that you're trying to achieve. My first playthrough of this game, I really kind of had some issues with it, and I kind of had buyer's remorse. I also found that I was spending like more time looking at the app and reading narrative text inside the app than actually looking at the board. And at first that really bothered me. So, I mean, after my first playthrough of this game, I was really pretty disappointed with it. I wanted to give it another shot. On my second playthrough, I really kind of found a groove with it. I think I got more comfortable with managing the app, got a lot more comfortable with the rules of the game. Everything started to flow. The idea that the app sort of acts as a game master and is revealing hidden information to me, and managing combat with the monsters, and managing the completion of quest objectives. The core box only comes with 4 scenarios, and at this point I've played each scenario either 2 or 3 times, and I'm still having a blast with it. I've been playing with 2 investigators. I'm usually right there walking that razor's edge between life and death. Even though that can be frustrating, I think it's probably the sign of a pretty well-balanced game. But knowing that I've been so close to winning so many times, it really makes me want to come back for more. And I also look forward to playing this game with 3 investigators. I think it will be a bit easier with 3. But I've never got up and running so quickly with a brand new game of this size before. The app does a lot of really heavy lifting that you would otherwise have to learn if the game was completely analog. I like crunchy analog games. I think right now, at this exact moment, Mansions of Madness is tied with Sword and Sorcery as my favorite dungeon crawl gaming experience. It kind of checks all the boxes. I think it's all about level setting and adjusting expectations and just allowing yourself the suspension of disbelief